Welcome to Crawlspace. I'm Tim here today with Lance. Lance, how are you today?
I'm doing fantastic today. We have a guest on who is, at this point, basically a co-host. He's a regular contributor and friend, very good friend to you and I and to the show, and all of our listeners know who he is. So we're super excited to have him back on to talk about something local to him. Well, I guess not local because this happened just outside of Toronto, but he is also Canadian on the East Coast. But Tim, I'm like on the West Coast of your feelings. How are you?
Wow, feeling great. Thanks a lot for asking. And yes, our guest today, Jordan Bonaparte, is from Halifax, Nova Scotia. And of course, he is the host of the Nighttime podcast. First time I ever heard of Atlantic Time was when we interviewed him the first time. God, that's like 8 years ago or something like that now. So we're all dinosaurs in this conversation, Lance, but we speak about his show, and one of the stories that he covered recently that was not known to me or probably a lot of our American listeners, but it's the story of a mass shooting from December of 2022. It's tragic, but what's really kind of compelling about it is the videos that Francesco Villi made and sort of the paranoid spiral that he ended up going down.
Yeah, this conversation really plays out in a very riveting fashion because we start off with some, friendly banter back and forth with Jordan because that's just what we do. But we quickly get into the story of Francesco and, like you said, his spiral. This is something that's so uncommon in Canada. This was an upscale retirement condominium. It was multi-levels. And this Francesco definitely had a lot of emotional issues. He was not close to his family, and he spent most of his days stewing on these conspiracies that were, in his head, geared towards him and geared towards the direct murder of him by the board of this condominium association. It's really a sad story. People should listen to it. It is a cautionary tale if you have family members who are exhibiting behaviors like this. These videos that you mentioned, and we do play them. We play 2 or 3 of these videos, and then we play one from one of the surviving victims of his attack. This is something that went from angry videos with no direct threats to the most extreme bit of violence that you can imagine being the end outcome. So while it's a great conversation, there's a lot that can be taken from this.
Very good. Yeah. And Jordan is a great host and does amazing work over there at the Nighttime Podcast. You can check out all of his work at nighttimepodcast.com. Okay. Make sure to follow us on social media at Crawlspace Podcast or Crawlspace Pod.
All right. We're going to break real quick for a commercial, and we will be right back with Jordan Bonaparte from the Nighttime Podcast.
Thanks to our sponsors, and now we're back to the program. Welcome back to the podcast, Jordan Bonaparte of the Nighttime Podcast. What the heck's going on?
I don't know what's going on. I'm excited that you guys are back. I didn't know what happened to you. I thought the pod gods had struck you down, but no, like the proverbial phoenix, you've risen from the ashes and are back to making content. Back on the content treadmill. Welcome back, guys.
Thank you, but I didn't hear anything you said because of the enormous applause that is still going on for your introduction here.
Yeah, cool down, everybody. Cool down.
Yeah,
I'm here.
Take it easy, people.
Mm-hmm. I think this is like probably my 4th time here on Crawlspace.
I've lost count.
At least, yeah. You got a mix missing in too. We've had you on there, I think. Talk about Emma Philippoff as well. So yeah, it's been a lot. And gosh, we first met you like 2015 now, right?
It's crazy how much time has passed. Every so often I'll get like Facebook memories popping up of my trip to Boston in probably 2015 or something, although it just feels like a couple months ago. Yeah, it's been a while.
That also just happened a couple months ago, a second time. So we've actually met you in person twice now.
Yeah, once at a live event in Somerville and the second time at Chuck E. Cheese.
Chuck E. Cheese.
In Everett, Massachusetts, yes.
Lance, do you want to tell the story about how you didn't want to go in Chuck E. Cheese alone for fear of looking like a weirdo without a kid walking into Chuck E. Cheese?
I think you just told the story. I don't know if I have anything more to say.
That was pretty much it.
I think that wraps up my feeling, which was like, I don't know how comfortable I am just sort of going into Chuck E. Cheese and then like scoping the place out and being like, no, I'm looking for a couple of friends.
I don't know that you can get in without a kid.
Imagine if I was refused entry.
Banned from every Chuck E. Cheese in America.
Classic Zach Galifianakis.
Jordan, your son wouldn't even want to talk to me for the rest of his life if I got banned from Chuck E. Cheese.
No, he would have no interest. You would have nothing to offer Mr. Chuck E. Cheese, my son.
He should really make a documentary about the history of Chuck E. Cheese.
There's very little my 11-year-old likes to talk about more than Chuck E. Cheese and the history and the animatronics. Yeah, we did a trip from Nova Scotia to the U.S. with the sole purpose of getting terrible pizza and playing video games that were covered in probably biological material, but it was worth it.
Amazing. And Tim told a story about it, the Chuck E. Cheese that he went to in Burlington, Massachusetts. And just coincidentally, I had a doctor's appointment in Burlington the next day, and I realized I was in the same plaza, and I was at the location of the previous Chuck E. Cheese. It's no longer there. So it just kind of came full circle. Not really full circle, but it was just kind of coincidental.
There's some Crawlspace listener out there right now who's like, finally, we're getting some Chuck E. Cheese discourse on this podcast.
Right. They were just about to send us a bad review. Love the show, but no Chuck E. Cheese. Oh, wait.
Yeah, finally.
A bunch of Chuck E. Cheese, yeah.
I want to quickly point out to anyone who's not watching this, Tim has the old school nighttime t-shirt on. When you came to visit us a few months ago, I was wearing mine, and since then I can't find it. This is going to have to be a new podcast, missing nighttime t-shirt.
Yeah, and I couldn't decide between my black hoodie, my newer black hoodie, or my dirty black hoodie. So I wore my newer black hoodie.
Looks great.
All right. And now, can you tell the audience that doesn't remember your other appearances on Crawlspace or Missing, or isn't familiar with your show, who you are and what you do?
My name is Jordan Bonaparte. I host the Nighttime podcast, and I think I'm one of the early adapters of podcasting. I've been doing it since shortly after you guys started. I started around 2015. I'm based in Nova Scotia, and I call my show Nighttime. It covers Canadian crime, mysteries, weird stories. Typically, it's a lot like Crawlspace. I like to think you guys copied me a bit, but I'll do on occasion I'll do deep dives into a story with multi-part episodes covering it, but I'll often do just kind of one-off episodes. Something that a lot of people have been enjoying lately is a series I do called Keep Canada Weird, which is a weekly episode that collects and discusses weird news stories from the past week from across Canada. That's a lot of fun. And another series I do a lot that people enjoy is called Encounters with Creeps. And that's one where listeners of the show simply send me voicemails describing a time that they encountered someone they consider to be a creep. Maybe it was a weird first date, an odd customer or coworker, or just like a weird neighbor peering in their windows. But I think a lot of nighttime listeners look forward to those two series. So that's what I do.
That's a great concept, Encounters with Creeps.
It will never run out, I'll tell you. If I wake up in the morning and I have 6 emails, 5 of them are people telling me about the creeps they saw yesterday. And I welcome everyone.
A lot of creeps out there.
They're all at Chuck E. Cheese.
Yeah, there was this guy hanging around outside Chuck E. Cheese in Everett. His shirt said nighttime.
Yeah.
He's talking about going to TGI Fridays for lunch.
That's the kind of stuff we get into.
Real quick on that, is it more like interesting encounters, or is it like real, like this is a creep?
When we call out for the stories, what we say is we don't want to hear anything that is like, like sexual assault or anything that like the police should be notified about. What we want to hear about is kind of like lightly traumatic. So something where maybe you may even need us to analyze the story and decide if this person is a creep or is it maybe just a misunderstanding. So it could be like, I don't know, a customer who is just overly friendly and maybe kind of bordering on crossing that line, or a coworker who maybe just got a little touchy, but maybe not touchy enough that they're going to lose their job. So that's kind of where we want to keep it. So it's a little light, but it's also cautionary, where it reminds you to keep your eyes open and your wits about yourself. You could be walking your dog, you could be applying for a job, you could be showing up at someone's house to buy something you wanted to get from Facebook Marketplace, and you may encounter a situation where you really need to make an important decision on the spot. And I think Encounters with Creeps will give you kind of a platform to explore those ideas in a fun and non-threatening way.
Eventually, Tim and I will come up with some version of that we're not going to call stealing, but we'll borrow that idea too.
Okay, that's fair.
It's flattery, really.
The concept is yours. I ask you to start every episode with like, welcome to Crawlspace's Encounters with Creeps, borrowed from Nighttime Podcast. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever.
Easy enough.
Go. Yeah, good. Deal.
Wow. Well, very cool. Very interesting stuff you got going on over there at Nighttime. You've covered a story recently. It's about a guy named Francesco Villi. So this is a really wild story from 2022 in Ontario. Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about this?
Took place in 2022 in an area called Vaughn, Ontario, which is like a suburb of Toronto. But for all intents and purposes, people would often just refer to this area as Toronto. I think this is going to be another example of how things can happen in Canada, but the story doesn't leave the country. We can have a horrific tragedy or some, compelling case that captivates Canadians, but you just cross that border to even where you fellas are, which is pretty close to the Canadian border, and this story will be completely new. I don't know what it is about that. When you watch the news in Canada, we're constantly told about American news stories, but it doesn't flow the other way around. In this story of Francesco Villi, is a story from 2022 that involves a mass shooting committed by a 73-year-old man. And ultimately, it all comes down to disagreements and fighting he had with the management of the condo corporation he lived in. Eventually, it devolves and leads to a mass shooting with 5 innocent victims. It was big news when it happened, but again, it's like when I covered it on my show, I heard from so many people around the world and even some around Canada who had no idea that this event had happened. That kind of surprised me as well, because it was a bit of not like a social media story, but a lot of the story takes place on Facebook. Because as Francesco Villi was arguing with the management of his building, his outlet for a lot of his grievances with them was his Facebook account, where he was making these hour-long videos almost daily, where he was just ranting and raving about the problems he had with the management of his building. And those problems ultimately were his belief that deficiencies in the building's design led to his home being overwhelmed by what's called electromagnetic energy. I don't even know if that's a real thing, but if you read online, there are a lot of people who think, 5G towers and electromagnetic energy. He had this idea that there was problems with his building that was leading to electromagnetic energy coming into his unit and harming him. And he also believed that there was a toxic smell in the building due to poor ventilation from a garbage room that was leading to toxic fumes coming in his unit and also making him sick. So in his mind, the building was designed poorly. It was killing him. When he would lodge these complaints with the management of his building, if they didn't agree with him and see the problems that he saw, he equated it to almost like a conspiracy of silence against him that was akin to a murder conspiracy. He felt like he was being murdered by these people that wouldn't help him. And it went on for years.
Oh, man, I have such a difficult time approaching stories like this, because on the surface, it's like, okay, he believed this electromagnetic thing. He believed that this odor was coming out of the garbage disposal area. The initial thought, right, is like, okay, this man is having some sort of paranoid episode. But just the other day, we interviewed a couple of gentlemen who are doing a deep dive. They're in their 70s. They've been reporters and investigators their entire lives, and they're doing a deep dive back into the Karen Silkwood story, where Karen Silkwood was allegedly run off the road, murdered because of what she knew at a drilling company, like an oil and energy drilling company. And her body was loaded with plutonium because she was handling that all day at this plant. And she identified workplace conditions that were causing people to get sick and causing a lot, like so many issues. And she was going to, blow the whistle on it. So I hear that story, and it's like, if you were to approach that story a different way, some people might say, oh, well, Karen Silkwood was experiencing these paranoid episodes. So that's why I have such a difficult time approaching these stories. He tried to be as open-minded as possible, but you have these videos of this guy.
As I said, he's put a lot of content on Facebook is where he was doing it. And that also led to some problems, because as he was arguing with, I should explain this as well, because not everyone will understand the concept of a condo versus an apartment that you're renting. So a condo is different than an apartment, where an apartment, you'll pay monthly rent to your landlord and you live there. They can evict you if you don't pay your rent or whatever. A condo is different, where a condo is a type of property ownership. You will buy a unit in a building. So let's just, for the sake of argument, let's say you pay $300,000 and you buy unit 104 in this building. You own that unit as opposed to pay rent on it, but it's a unit within a building. So there are common areas like the elevators or the roof or the outdoor landscaping that all the unit owners collectively own. And to maintain that stuff, you pay a monthly fee called a condo fee. You pay $300,000, you buy your unit. Now you're paying, $200 a month, let's say, and that money goes into a pot to be used for things like landscaping, snow removal, replacing the windows when the time comes. And the people who are in charge of how the condo's money's used, like a board of directors, generally it's going to be condo owners that will be elected to serve on this board. That's the background of this. Francesco Villi, he buys a unit, he's paying his monthly fees. His first complaint against the board is a bad smell in the building. In his life before his retirement, he worked as a contractor, worked in building design and construction and whatnot. So he had a bit of background knowledge on how these things should work. And his belief was that the garbage room in the building wasn't properly ventilated. He thought the vent should have extended further from the building and that would solve the problem. He went to the condo board with that. They looked into it and they agreed with him. They extended the vent. That's important to mention just because them kind of giving him an inch, I think made him feel like, this building's design faulty and nobody is going to realize it unless I stand up for us all and, get this fixed. So that happens. They extend the vent. He's slightly happier about that. The next thing that happens is at one point, I think he gets plans for the building, like blueprints or whatnot. And he realizes that his unit is directly above some kind of power room where there's a bunch of like outlets and breakers and all this sort of thing. Somehow that leads him into researching the risks associated with being this close to this electrical equipment. And he forms the belief in his mind that the building or that the unit or the space in the building that's housing the electrical equipment isn't properly insulated. And as a result, this harmful electromagnetic energy is coming into his unit. He thinks it's making him sick, giving him cancer is something he brings up a lot. He goes to the condo board a bunch of times. They investigate, they look into it. They can find no problems. So they're not going to spend a bunch of money to do all this stuff. And that's kind of where his trouble starts. Anytime he sees them, he's hollering at them. He's following them around, filming them, putting it on Facebook, as well as just sitting in front of his camera ranting. I'm going to play just a short clip where 73-year-old Francesco Villi is just complaining about the issues in his unit. This is just a short excerpt of a much longer video.
To me, this is my strongest opinion. This is premeditated murder. I don't see anyone doing anything to solve my case. I get up in the morning trembling because the floor vibrates. The floor vibrates. It's a vibration on the floor. And I tremble. I shake in the morning. What an old, beautiful age that I'm living. My life has been destroyed systematically.
So just the tone of that will give you a sense of kind of what you would expect. It's long ranting videos about premeditated murder. My life is destroyed. These criminals won't do anything for me.
We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsor.
And a thank you to our sponsors. Back to the program.
So for it to have been premeditated murder, that would have been like quite a deep conspiracy with several people involved, including like the builders of the building, I guess. Was there anybody who confirmed that it smelt weird before that, besides him, or anyone else talking about shaking or any kind of weird side effects like that?
This seemed to be primarily of problems that were in his head. That said, he would do things like stand in the front lobby of the building, passing out like flyers and stuff, trying to let people know what's going on. And it was one of those things where if you agreed with him, it was evidence to him that he was right and he had to keep fighting. If you disagreed with him, you were probably being paid off by the board of directors and you were a part of the conspiracy against him, and now you were an enemy. The people who designed the building were a target of his harassment. They didn't live in the building. The board of directors for the condo, they lived in the building with him. So they would have to run into him in the hallways and deal with his abuse in person. And that led to a series of court hearings. The board of directors were trying to get him to stop posting content online and harassing people in the building. And that led to peace bond applications, or what we would call like restraining orders. Basically, they were trying to get court orders to prevent him from publishing this stuff online, naming them, and harassing them in the building. He countersued for $1 million against the condo corporation and the designers of the building. He ended up losing that lawsuit because it was, I read through it. It was complete nonsense. And he then ended up suing his lawyers for, the way they handled it. So there was quite a bit of legal maneuvering within courts. It was mostly a waste of time, but a waste of time that cost the board of directors a little over $31,000 in defense costs. The judge then demanded or required that Francesco Villi reimburse the condo board of directors further expenses to fight against his what a lot of people see as a frivolous lawsuit, which Francesco Villi then interpreted to be, not only are they trying to kill me, they also want my money. So now they want this $31,000. They want me dead. They're not doing anything about it. They have a peace bond against me. He didn't enjoy the peace bond because for him, that was, in his mind, criminals who were trying to kill him and take his money. It was their way of silencing him. And he wasn't going to be silenced. So he, on multiple occasions, breached his peace bond, which was a no contact order. Ultimately, he was required to, any communication with the condo's board of directors was required to be done like through email rather than shouting at them in the hallways in the middle of the night. After several breaches of the peace bond, the condo board of directors took their final stance on this, which would be to seek a court order that would require Francesco Villi to sell his unit and move out, because you can't evict him because he owns it. So they were looking for a court order to have his unit sold and him be forced out of the building. And I'm going to play another clip here because this one's really interesting. This court hearing was going to be scheduled for the 19th of December in 2022. And this court hearing is ultimately going to be like the straw that breaks the camel's back, because it's, in all likelihood, had this hearing had happened, Francesco Villi would have been required to sell his unit and leave the building. I'm going to play a call here where this is one of the many things Francesco put on his Facebook. It's him phoning the lawyer representing the board of directors of the condo. And during this call, that lawyer explains to him that on the 19th of December, which is, I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks after this call occurred, they explained to him there's going to be a hearing and they're going to want you to leave the building. So you're going to get to hear him react to this information. So here is a December 13th call from Francesco Villi to the lawyer for the Condo Corp about a court hearing that would have occurred a week later. Here it comes.
I have no energy, no strength to prepare materials or to go to court at this time to defend myself. When what's her name? Nicoleta called me, I thought it was to do with the agreement that you and I agree. And then she told me that they're trying to get a date for the 19th of December. And I said, no, I don't know. No, but she. The board needs, you want to know what this is about? The board needs you to stop harassing people, to stop shouting at people, to stop dealing with the concierge, and you need to pay for the legal costs that you caused the corporation to incur. How much legal cost a Saturday? But they're high. This has been going on for years. Listen, McKay. This is not about money. Francesco Villi is not about money. I don't sue people for money. I don't need money. I don't want money. I have no need. I told you this before. I have no need to harass anybody. People harass me. The people. Why are you shouting at people? You can't behave that way. Mr. McKay, in the name of God, hear me. I'm a poor soul. Hear me. I don't want to say nothing to the judge. I just want you to tell me, what do you people want? Put on paper what they want. They get it. Well, last time you were in court, you were ordered to take everything down from Facebook and to stop harassing people. But you couldn't do that. You started up again. You reloaded stuff to the internet. That's why we're back in court. When did I start again? In April. Oh, yeah. Listen. Do I need to do that? For a lousy ceiling. Okay, I'm going to go now. No. Mr. After you've been found in contempt of court. Mr. McKay. You can't. Mr. McKay, please listen to me. I am a soul dying. Tell me what you want and you'll get it. Send it to me today. I will sign. I'm sorry?
We sent it to you. It's been dropped off at your unit. The corporation is asking for you to sell your unit and move out.
Oh, you think...
That's the request at this point. You're not capable of living in the community and behaving.
So you think I'm gonna just put it for sale and sell my unit?
That's the request.
If it was that simple, it would have already been sold 2015. It's not that simple.
I'm going to go now, Mr. Villi, but the request is in the factum.
Mr. McKay.
Whatever you're telling to me, you need to tell to the judge.
No, I'm not going anywhere.
Well, I think it would be a mistake if you don't come to court on the 19th, but that's your choice.
Okay, listen to me.
Okay, I need to go now.
No, I need to say this, senora.
She was a little patient with him.
Yeah, I mean, you got to kind of commend her tolerance, because it sounds like she's at her last nerve with this guy, and it's been going on for a year, she said. But she reiterated that it's a request. So it wasn't a demand that he sell and move, right? Was that intentional? Because she said that a couple of times.
They were requesting it, but on the 19th of December, like a week after that call, they were going to present that to a judge and try to turn their request into a court order.
Why wouldn't he want to move if the building was killing him?
That's an interesting question, because he had money. And actually, like, we glossed over a lot of the history, but at one point he lived in the building, sold his unit and moved out, and then came back and bought another unit at one point. So he did leave and come back at one point. You need a psychologist to answer that question. But I think this battle, he saw it as like this David versus Goliath, good versus evil thing that he completely obsessed about. So I think this was what his life was. His life was obsessing and worrying about this issue and doing what he thought was this virtuous fight versus the condo board, despite it making no sense and, wasting the last 5 or 7 years of his life almost. At this point in this man's life, his family seemed to want nothing to do with him. He didn't really have any friends. He wasn't working. He was just like the cranky, crazy old man in his unit who was at war with the condo board. And that was his life.
So he had no one living with him, no known support system?
No. In any supporters that he had or contacts that he had, it was generally in the context of this battle. He would reach out to someone, a politician or some other resident of the building, to get them to come see his issues. And if they didn't see the issues, they weren't in contact anymore. If they did understand his issues and maybe agreed with him in some way, he would almost like try to recruit them into this battle. And if they backed away, they were a part of the problem and the conspiracy against him. If you encountered Francesco Villi, it was going to be about his war with the condo board, which is kind of sad. Like, what a horrible way to spend your 70s.
Yeah, seriously. This is like one of those stories where I feel like he had chosen the condo board as the enemy, as you've said, in so many ways. So the condo board's the enemy, and now whatever was lingering in his personality latched onto that, and that became the world to him. Had he done this before with any other organization that was leading up to this?
Well, he actually did. If you look at his history, I mentioned he ran his own. He was a contractor who ran his own company doing construction and contracting for a period of like 20, 25 years. He was on and off work with injuries related to work or related to car accidents. And oftentimes these injuries would result in insurance payouts, which would then result in him arguing with the insurance companies for more money or for longer terms of payment or whatnot. Before he ever moved into this retirement building condo, he had already battled with insurance companies for years. This battle and this like kind of obsession about disputes, that was a part of his personality. His children, who at the time of him living in this building had nothing to do with him, they described him as being angry, violent, abusive for years. So it's a part of him for sure.
They described him as violent. What about weapons? Did he have weapons earlier than what we're talking about?
That also will become an interesting question, is when he's living in this building, and I should explain as well, we're describing a condo, an apartment building. If people are thinking of it, your typical apartment building that you would rent, this is probably a step above that. This is almost like a gated community where there's 2 or 3 large buildings, a couple hundred units in each building. There's like a gym, there's a pool. These are really nice higher end buildings. Like when I see these buildings, I think like, oh man, I would love to retire somewhere like that. When Francesco Villi's in there, as again, a 73-year-old man, he is harassing people, yelling at them and filming them and putting crazy videos up on Facebook. But there's never any points where he seems to be violent. He doesn't threaten physical harm on anyone. He doesn't get, touchy or push anyone. It seems to just be this brooding, verbally abusive old man. So I don't think there's any reason for anyone to feel like this is going to go the way of physical violence. I don't believe anyone in the building would have expected he had access to firearms. But what they didn't know is in 2019, about 3 years before that call we just heard, Francesco Villi legally bought a handgun, which in Canada, to buy a semi-automatic handgun, there are kind of hurdles you need to get over in terms of training and in terms of the background checks and all this. So he was able to legally get a semi-automatic handgun without the people he's arguing and feuding with knowing about it. That's saying something in Canada. I wouldn't even know where to begin. It's not like some parts of the US where there's like gun stores around. I don't even know where you would buy a handgun here in Canada.
I was looking at that he bought a Beretta, which is an Italian-made handgun, which made me think if he did that intentionally, that he was some sort of like poetic justice or something because he's Italian and it's like sort of an extension of him.
I wonder. I don't think anyone saw it coming or expected the firearm for him to have a firearm or for one to be involved. But as we described, the condo corporation or the condo board, they took their last resort, which was to get him a court order to sell and move out of the building. That call we just heard was on the 13th of December. The hearing would have been on the 19th of December. The actual story that will play out will happen the day before that hearing, the evening of the 18th of December. The evening before this court hearing is when Francesco Villi will take, I guess what we would say he probably saw as his last resort, which is vengeance against the board of directors for this building, which will ultimately be what people will refer to as the Vaughn Ontario Condo tragedy or condo shooting. Francesco Villi's vengeance against who he sees as people that are trying to kill him will be to go to their units with that Beretta and kill them before they can testify in court the next morning, I suppose, was his plan. Before we get into kind of the timeline of what goes down, or of how this all happens, I'm going to play you one more video because I think this will give us a look at maybe his mental state. This is the last video Francesco will share on Facebook. We heard the call earlier with the lawyer that hangs up on him. He spends the rest of the day on the 13th calling back to the law office trying to talk to her, but she's not taking his calls. That night, the evening of the 13th, is when he makes this last video. And he doesn't specifically threaten anybody, but some of the things he says in hindsight are pretty concerning. Listen to this. And this is only a small piece of a much longer video, of course.
Today is December 13th. 2022. I'm a dying man. It's shortly before 3 p.m. They've been tormenting and torturing me for 7 years. I live under a hydro station and everybody are working to destroy me. The truth, all my truth is been putting 100 feet under earth. And their lies, they are triumphing. And no one seems to care. And those ones that they care, they're afraid to speak. I am not afraid to speak. I will speak to my last breath and this earth against these criminals. What can they do? Take my body? Take it. I could not care less. But you will never, you will have my soul. I will never become one of you liars, demons, never. Remember this. You don't want me to post on social media. Why? You don't want me to post. Does the truth bother you so much? If you would have given me some comfort in my home, that's all I want. Comfort in my home. Why it's been denied? For 70 years, why? You indecent bastards and criminals. That's what you are. And I fought the criminals from young, and I will fight criminals as you are for as long as I'm alive. You have destroyed my life, lying bastards. That's all you are. Deceiver, lying bastards. And either you deceive the judge or you work some deals. I don't know. Now you want to jail me for what? Why you don't settle with me? Why you don't fix the electrical room under this floor that it takes more than half of my unit? I don't sleep at night. Electric magnetic waves, magnetic waves, hydro emissions, noises. And in the morning I shake like I have Parkinson because my bed trembles, you bastards. You bastard son of a bitches, all of you. Francesco Villi, the one and only in Canada. My unit is 104, 9235 Jerry Street, Maple, Ontario, Canada.
It's a very different tone to that one.
Yeah, sounds very angry there.
Did he refer to them as demons?
Demons, lying bastards. He suggests that maybe they paid off the judge. And one thing, it was kind of hard to hear in his accent, but he says, it's all lies, but you're triumphant. So I think what he's saying is like, you're doing this horrible stuff and you're getting away with it. Like kind of reading between the lines there, he's saying like, take my body. I don't care. I'll fight till it's my last breath. You're winning. And in hindsight now, listening to that call, it's kind of like his version of a suicide note or threat is the way I take it.
Like a kamikaze pilot. Like I'm going into this and I know I'm going to die, but I'm going to take as many as I can with me. The demon thing was really interesting to me though, because when he said that, I started to think like maybe he's like getting to the point where he's hallucinating things, where he's like starting to believe like, you know, there's like a supernatural or a paranormal factor that's playing into this.
Also keep in mind, one of his complaints is that the interference from this electromagnetic energy stuff is causing him to not sleep. And I believe that. I think this old man was probably not in great shape anyway, but he was also not sleeping, obsessing about this battle. So there's certainly psychiatric kind of problems at play here for sure. And people even who encountered him on the days leading up to what he will eventually do, they described him as looking really frail and confused and unwell. You know, there was a lot going on here. But that all said, I don't think anyone would have expected what was going to happen. You know, even when you listen to that recording we just heard, in hindsight, you can find these kind of like clues and red flags within it. If you just had that call, I don't think, or that video, and you share that with police, I don't think that would be enough to get someone to go break down his door and search his unit for a handgun or something like that. It was maybe just a little more angry than what he usually puts out, but it was certainly not like a direct threat to do harm to anybody.
How long after that did he actually commit violence?
That video that we just heard and the call with the lawyer was on the 13th of December. The hearing was going to be on the 19th. It was actually the evening of the 18th that he committed violence. I'll walk you through just kind of a quick timeline of what actually happens. So on the evening of the 18th, the day before his hearing, about 7 o'clock is when he does this. He takes his handgun, he loads it up, he walks out of his unit on the first floor of the building, Unit 104. And the first thing he does is pull a fire alarm, which rings the alarm through the entire building, for one, but it also disables the elevators in the building. The elevators are now locked. The alarm is going off. The first thing he does is he goes into the stairwell and he walks up to the 16th floor. It takes him about 20 minutes from when he pulls the alarm to when he gets on the 16th floor. Because again, I don't know about you guys, but I don't know if I could walk up 16 flights of stairs and I'm in decent shape. This is an old man who feels like he's on death's door. He manages to do it. And when he gets there, he goes to the 16th floor. He goes to the unit owned by one of his main enemies, which is the vice president of the condo board of directors. It's a 57-year-old woman named Rita Camilleri. Many of his videos mentions her as a demon and a criminal. Somehow he gets her to open the door. As she does, he murders both her as well as her partner, a 79-year-old man, Vittore Panza. He kills both of them, leaves their unit. A neighbor of that on the 16th floor hears the gunfire, and they make the first call to 911, reporting gunfire. They report seeing him by name with a handgun. They make that call just a little after 7:20. He then goes down the hall further, where another board member, a 59-year-old man named Naveed Dada, he shoots Naveed Dada. Naveed Dada manages to call 911 and report what happened before he passes away. It's believed that he died while on the call with the 911 operator. Something else we should mention is the elevators are disabled. There's an active shooting in the building, so they're not going to send an ambulance into the building. They're going to send police in first to clear the building before ambulance gets in. So that will come into play because there's going to be some survivors who are waiting a hell of a long time for help. After he murders 3 people on the 16th floor, he goes back into the stairwell to go to the penthouse where the president of the condo board lives. His name is John Danino. John Danino is in there with his wife, Doreen, and they have company over. In fact, in a moment, I'll play a clip because there's a very interesting clip where Doreen will survive a shooting and she will describe in detail what happened and how Francesco Villi managed to get her to answer the door. But ultimately, John Danino and his wife, Doreen, they have company over. The company was about to leave the home to go home. Like they were over for supper or something. They were about to leave when the fire alarm went off. But since the elevator was going to be disabled or was disabled, they thought, we'll just, hang out until this is settled and the elevator will be back and you'll go. Not long after that, a knock on the door happens and John's wife, Doreen, gets up to answer the door. When she does, she doesn't realize it's Francesco out there. He actually had a bit of a disguise. What he had done was he had his hood up and his head down. She survives the shooting. She gets shot in the face at point blank range. She told the news that she believed it was a young boy that was at the door because he was just a small little man. She thought it was a young boy, maybe a neighbor or something, knocking to ask what was going on with the alarm. Because again, her husband is the president of the board. As she opens the door, he takes his hood off. She sees who it is. As soon as she reacts to it's him, he puts the gun in her face, shoots her. She falls to the ground. And when she does, her body kind of lands in the doorway. So no one can get the door shut. And Francesco stands in the door that's propped open by her on the ground. And her husband, John Danino, and the company, fortunately, they were quick to react. And what they're doing is just grabbing anything they can, vases, pictures and frames, and they're just throwing things at him to try to get him out of the unit. And fortunately, it worked. They managed to kind of beat him down enough that one of the guests that were there could grab Doreen's leg, move it out of the way, slam the door shut and lock it, and then run to the phone and call 911 with Doreen on the floor, gasping for life, basically. And there's not a lot more that's going to happen because from the penthouse, Francesco is going to go down the stairwell to the 4th floor. He's going to find board members Russell and his wife, Lorraine Minook. They're a 75 and 71-year-old couple. So it's a lot of older people. It's, again, like a retirement community. He goes to their door, probably using the same false pretenses with the hood up, gets them to answer, and kills them both. And it's at this point that a police officer who is going floor by floor clearing the building encounters him. At first, the cops thought it was just one of the residents. So the cop's like, hey, you got to go in your unit. When Francesco turns around, the cop realizes he has a gun in his hand. The cop orders him to drop the gun. Francesco doesn't. The cop shoots him, I think 3 times, and Francesco dies in the hallway of the 3rd floor. He died actually outside of another target's residence. He was trying to get into another unit when the cop came upon him. So that's kind of the timeline of what happens. It all happens over a period of 25 minutes or so from start to finish. But in that period of time, in one building, he did a hell of a lot of damage.
And we'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors.
Thanks to our sponsors, and now we're back to the program.
That is an incredible, harrowing story. Amazed that this woman survived the point-blank gunshot to her face.
Absolutely. It hit her in such a way that it went through her mouth and out the back without hitting any vital organs. So she was actually on the news, I think it was maybe 3 weeks later, describing the incident. I'll play you that clip because I think it's really interesting to listen to because she goes into detail of what happened and what she was thinking.
Yeah, we have a second chance in life.
Doreen Danino was back at home in the high-rise condominium building in Vaughn, where she was nearly killed. To look at you, I wouldn't have even known that you had been shot in the face, right here, around your mouth, right?
Right. It's a little crooked. It's numb. There's a small scar.
Around 7 p.m. on a Sunday, a week before Christmas, as Doreen and her husband John were entertaining friends in their penthouse unit, the fire alarm went off.
We heard what sounded like a bang. We weren't sure what it was. And then someone was pounding on our door.
Doreen went to the door.
I looked in the peephole, but I saw what I thought was a young boy with a hoodie on. And I thought it was maybe one of our family members. So I just opened it. And then I just went, as soon as I saw his face, I went, oh my God.
She recognized it was Francesco Villi, a 73-year-old who owned a unit on the first floor. Villi had been fighting the condo board in court for years. Doreen's husband, John, is the condo board president.
He raised his arm and all I remember is just swinging my head back and falling to the ground. The blood was just coming out of my mouth.
In the same fashion that he lifted the gun to shoot my wife, he did the same in my direction.
John says he threw a crystal vase at Villi before a brave guest who was over for dinner intervened.
And I do remember John and our friends throwing things and her getting up and slamming the door and locking it.
Doreen spent 6 weeks in hospital recovering, her jaw and teeth shattered, and there are more reconstructive surgeries ahead, but she's grateful to be alive.
I don't want to think about him. I want to be able to open my door or leave my condo and not think about it.
Doreen has trouble eating because of the nerve damage in her lip and says she may never have the titanium plate in her jaw removed. But still, she remains so positive, vowing to stay in this condominium because she has great friends here and tremendous support.
Harrowing, to say the least.
Seriously, like, how do you look at life after that? I know she said that she just wanted to stay in the condo and not think about him when she opens the door, but she's going to think about him every single time she opens the door, right?
Certainly. And not only that, is like her husband's the board of directors for the condo corporation. Other members of the board are who were killed. So it's like kind of like somewhere between friend and coworker that lived in the building with you. So there's, such a stain, a tragic stain on the building. There's probably great motivation to kind of heal the damage done by just carrying on. And that's like, I can't imagine that that's not how they're feeling. Like, we just need to make this our safe home again. He's gone. We've also lost a lot of our friends. So let's, memorialize them by making this building, the home it should have been 7 years ago before all this started.
Yeah, it's absolutely wild story. I can't help wonder what could have possibly been done to prevent this. I really just don't know.
That was something I kind of struggled with as well, is like, often when you hear a story of a mass shooting or this kind of crime, you think of what could have been done differently to prevent it. What I've thought is that it's a shame that he didn't get violent sooner in a more moderate way. If he had punched one of the condo boards in the face in the elevator, a year earlier, and that was his breaking point, that maybe would have been motivation to get this done. But the fact that his first violent outburst was something so extreme that people didn't see coming, he didn't make obvious threats of it. That said, there's something to be said about our society, whether it's in Canada or the United States, how we treat mental illness and people who are obviously struggling. But that said, you can't beat down someone's door and force them to go to the hospital because they're being weird.
And I get so irritated when people categorize these things into one particular problem. I mean, he has mental illness. In the United States, we have a problem with how easy people have access to guns. And it's not one or the other. It's not like we have to solve the gun problem and it'll be fine. And then the other side says, well, it's not a gun problem, it's a mental illness problem. No, it's a combination of a lot of problems that just aren't properly addressed. And if there was something in place in 2019 when he bought that Beretta that could just analyze, or not, I don't want to say diagnose, because I don't want it to be like that clinical, but if there was some way that it could be assessed that this person has a tendency for violent outbursts, that's almost like a judgment call. So there just has to be something in there that's not pushing in on someone else's rights to free speech or to own a weapon. There has to be protections in place too. So I don't have the answer. I'm just venting.
Yeah, no, but it's especially complicated because he didn't have a propensity for violent outbursts. He had a propensity for vocal and annoying and maybe bordering on harassment, but not enough that he was charged with criminal harassment, which is a crime in Canada. It didn't get there. As far as it went in court was a civil matter, which is to pay the costs for the condo board to defend themselves. And he was required to keep the peace by communicating with them in a certain way. So it wasn't like you would have a case to have his rights taken away to go through the process of applying for this firearm, because it was a battle that went through court, didn't go his way. It wasn't anything over and above many other court cases that get heard here in Canada or there in the United States. For someone to come in after and, go through records of this court case and listen to things and be like, oh yeah, maybe this guy is unstable. I wish we lived in a society where gun ownership had that kind of thorough of an investigation before you actually get a gun, but that's certainly not the way it works.
No, I guess it can't work that way, because then you have people who should be perfectly capable of owning a firearm for whatever purpose, might have a bad day. And then they're categorized as mentally unstable when they're not, because it's such a gray area, such a fine line.
And you would also need to have a large team of investigators and researchers who are looking into the backgrounds of everybody applying. And one thing about our government and all the other things we rely on now is there seems to be a race to the bottom. Everything is happening faster and quicker and more efficiently. And this story here and this tragedy, there's a whole lot of factors that led to this happening. And, mental illness and gun ownership, that's certainly one of them, two of them, but I'm sure there's a whole lot more.
Wow. Well, Jordan, that is a wild story that you've come on our show and shared with us and our listeners. And I don't know. I don't even know what to say about it. It's just wild.
What I would say about it, or how I would wrap it up, is it's a cautionary tale for people who have conflict with people they're forced to be close to, whether it's a coworker or a neighbor or somebody that you have this festering, breeding issue with. This is kind of the worst case scenario or the worst case outcome. A lot of people out there have feuds with their neighbors, and they probably have a neighbor or a coworker or whatever that goes home at night and thinks about how much of a prick they are. I think you need to look out for yourself. And I think if I was on the board and Francesco or some old man was acting this way, I would at least watch my back. But that said, these people did everything right, and they didn't know it was him when they opened those doors. And to pull the fire alarm to disable the elevator, that's a planned thing. I'm convinced that he had been planning this for a long time and probably sitting there thinking, if they push me too far, this is what I'm going to do.
Well, I feel bad, I feel terrible for the victims. I feel, grateful that there were survivors. And I can't help feeling bad for Francisco. I mean, he is a family too, right? They have to hear this, and that's going to affect them. It's just too bad.
All around a tragedy. And that's why it's referred to as the Vaughn Ontario Condo tragedy, because it is tragedy in many ways.
God, let's just come back on and talk about Chuck E. Cheese next time.
It'd be so much easier.
Jeez, Jordan.
Yeah. That would be a lot easier.
Yeah, next time we'll do a live show next time, maybe a virtual live show, and we'll keep it light.
Not virtual. You guys come up to Nova Scotia. I've gone down there twice.
I know, we owe you. We owe you a trip to the Scotia.
Even better to do it in person. I got to get my passport renewed. Let's do it. It'd be wonderful.